I'm Will. I work for an organisation called LKMco. We're an education and youth think and action tank based in Hackney in North East London. All of the work we do, all of the research we do is focused in some form or another on young people and helping them make a fulfilling transition into adulthood. In a former life, I was a classroom teacher. I taught English literature at a large secondary school in North West London. LKMco's research says a few different things about race in education. Our most recent report, Boys on Track, which was commissioned by the GLA, the Greater London Authority, highlighted firstly that different ethnic groups perform on average better and worse than others within the London context. So being really specific, white boys who are eligible for free school meals tend to perform worse on average than their peers, and their Black Caribbean peers also tend to perform worse on average than their peers. That report highlights a number of different strategies for trying to counteract some of that inequality. So our research looking at boys' achievement in London, and specifically at Black Caribbean boys and at white free school meal eligible boys, who on average tend to perform less well academically than their peers at school. Our research highlights several ways in which educational settings can support those students. So one way in which they can support those boys is through addressing teachers' unconscious biases. We know that teachers are human, and therefore teachers bring with them all sorts of complicated and often unrealised unconscious biases in their day-to-day work. So it's important to delineate here between intention and outcome. So the vast majority of teachers would not describe themselves as racist, but lots of what schools do has undesirable and sometimes racist outcomes for students, in as much as the outcomes between different groups are inequitable. So training for staff around unconscious biases and making sure that they're aware of the biases that they're bringing to their day-to-day work is really, really important. There's a caveat to that, in as much as lots of the research on the impact of unconscious bias training is very mixed. And actually, I say mixed, often it shows that the training can not have any impact or can in fact make people feel quite uncomfortable. So I think alongside offering high quality training in unconscious bias, we actually probably also need to do some work to unpick and understand what high quality training in educational settings in relation to unconscious bias actually entails, so that we're really sure that what we're encouraging school practitioners who are really busy, we're sure that we're encouraging them to engage in activities that are beneficial for them and obviously their students. I think a third aspect around supporting students from minority ethnic backgrounds also relates to supporting the teachers. So we've undertaken research that highlights that teachers from minority ethnic backgrounds are less likely to report feeling that they have close working relationships with some of their ethnic majority colleagues. And secondly, that they feel like they have less access to career advancing opportunities in the form of training and also promotion. So I think an indirect way of benefiting pupils from racial minorities is actually making sure that we're doing a good job of supporting teachers from racial minorities. So I think there's something really tangible and specific schools can do in that respect, which is to make sure that these opportunities are not about sponsorship. They're not about head teachers just identifying the members of staff who should be put forward for training and promotional opportunities. This is about making sure that opportunities are truly open and that everyone feels supported and encouraged to apply and take these forward, not just the usual suspects who might actually, for whatever reason, be people that the head teacher feels a more close personal affiliation with for reasons around culture. Let's extrapolate that further. If we know that most head teachers tend to be from ethnic majority backgrounds, white backgrounds, and often a male, it's going to be those people who tend to be put forward and sponsored for those sorts of career advancing opportunities. So I think the more we can make those opportunities truly open to all, the better. So to improve social justice in education, and in particular in relation to race, I think there are several key things that need to happen. By social justice in education, I'm talking about ensuring that we're able to help young people, irrespective of their background, fulfil their potential. At the minute, obviously, we see systemic barriers to that being the case. So one thing I think is really crucial is acknowledging just how much pressure schools, colleges, youth clubs are under financially. Lots and lots of work is underway in these settings to support these young people. But there's certainly, we're operating in an age of austerity, and schools are feeling that very, very acutely. They're doing what they feel is best, and they're putting lots of energy into this. But with limited resource going in to schools in the form of money, that's very, very tough. So I think there are three key areas to focus on in terms of addressing social justice in education and ensuring that young people, irrespective of their ethnicity, are able to fulfill their potential both throughout school and then into adult life. So I think the first really key thing is actually around funding. I think lots of what schools do, what colleges, what settings working with young people do, it's very, very well intentioned, but capacity is very, very limited. We have a teacher recruitment and retention crisis on our hands. And actually, I think we need to be honest about the fact that provision is very, very stretched financially at the minute. So I'd like to see additional support in that respect. I think the second area is being really honest about what some of the challenges are here. So often, teachers are not doing anything intentionally racist or biased with their pupils. Very, very well intentioned, very, very high levels of moral imperative behind the work that they're doing. However, teachers are human. Humans have biases. And I think the more that we can make teachers aware of the sorts of biases that they're bringing to their work day to day through high quality unconscious bias training, the more equipped practitioners will be to ensure that what they're putting in place for their students is really, really appropriate. The third part is to acknowledge that schools are part of the puzzle, but they're not the whole answer. Young people have to be in school, and so we often want schools to be able to sort out all of these complicated, tricky problems for us. But actually, young people are encountering non-formal education and youth settings. They attend youth clubs and they spend time out of school attending, as I say, non-formal provision. They attend different schools. They attend primary school, secondary school, they might go to college, they might be in and out of different sorts of formal educational setting. And I think we need to acknowledge that. We also need to acknowledge young people have interactions with social services, with health services, with, in cases, criminal justice services. And we have to see school as part of the picture and education as part of the picture, but there's all these other things going on in a young person's life. So the more we can treat these issues holistically, I think the better we'll be able ultimately to ensure that all young people, irrespective of race, are able to fulfill their potential, both throughout their early years and childhoods, but also through teenage years and into